Steve. So as you all recall, when we had our last meeting in September, before we adjourned, we had a conversation on whether or not this group would like to hear from other individuals, at future conference calls of this committee. And we agreed, and we came up with a list of those and possible speakers. And so I thought that for our first one today, we would have a representative from the World Organization of the Scout Movement, WOSM. And I'm glad to be able to invite Jo de Man. He is from Belgium. He was elected as a member of the Scout Committee in 2017 at the World Scout Conference in Baku, Azerbaijan. He is also a member, or the chair, I should say, of the Growth and Strategy Coordination Group with WOSM. And I think most importantly, aside from all of that, he's also a very good close friend of mine. So without further ado, I'm here to introduce Jo to everyone.
Thank you, Joshua. And I'm glad you included the friend part. I think that's important. I am going to need some hosting rights or can I just share my screen? I can share my screen. It's beautiful. Hang on. Give me 1 second to set that up. This is possibly where it goes wrong. Can you actually see my screen?
Yes.
Yes, I see thumbs up. This is beautiful. So yeah, as Joshua was saying, I have the honor of serving as a member of the World Scout Committee. I have been supporting WOSM with its strategic development for the last 6 years, 8 years, something like that, in the development of a long-term vision, and now also the translation of that into our triennial plans, as we call them, and now also a one-year plan given the COVID situation, but I'll get to that in a second. So my focus is very much on strategic development for WOSM, but also growth. As Joshua said, I have the opportunity to lead on the growth agenda for WOSM. You might know that we have a bit of an ambition to grow. And so I have the pleasure of leading or charging that bit of work as well. I am from Belgium. I am not a native English speaker. My apologies if things are not clear, and I have a tendency to speak very fast. So if I need to slow down, just give me a nudge and then I'll slow down to a more baritone setting, all right? I prepared some slides. You have an opportunity to speak and interrupt me at any stage where you think he's making a mistake, or I don't really get what he's saying. Can you explain? So just interrupt when you want, all right? So there's 4 things that I wanted to cover with you. One was this, our journey towards Vision 2023. It sounds very close by now, which it actually is, but this started back in 2014. And so Vision 2023 is our long-term strategy for World Scouting. And then we'll take a look at our current strategic plan, or more short-term plan. We'll take a look at how WOSM is structured, how you can join in, and what our global initiatives and world events look like in the next coming years. And then we'll do a bit of a Q&A, so then you can ask any questions you've always wanted to ask WOSM, but were afraid to do so in the past. Before we start, I just wanted to go over a bit how much you know about WOSM. And so I put, I think, what are a number of numbers on the slide, and you can feel free to just shout in if you think what the number represents. Joshua, you're not allowed to play.
I'm guessing that one of the 6s stands for the 6 regions of the World Organization of the Scout. Because TAC serves 4 of the 6.
6 regions, exactly. That's 50 points for you, Tom.
171 countries, and
bingo.
And 100 million target for growth over the next 3 years on the initial plan.
True and true. So you get 100 points as well. You can use the 100 number once more.
Could be the number of years that WOSM's existed.
Almost.
Okay.
It's not 100 years that WOSM exists, but 100 years that something else exists.
Scouting movement.
No,
No.
that's since 1907.
Yeah.
We're on 1908, please.
Yeah.
Yeah.
About 112 years.
Is it 100 years since the first World Jamboree?
No.
1920,
Well,
Olympia. Yes, it is.
is it 100 years since there was? Yeah, but we already celebrated
Yeah.
that.
1920 Olympia, 100 years
Yeah.
about.
Then you can use it once more as well. And it's kind of special because we're celebrating it this week, actually. If you don't know,
Founding
we'll
of-
get to it in a bit.
Gilwell Park, 1920 first wood badge course.
1919.
Yeah, it was, wasn't it? It was last year.
Does anybody know what the 54 is about?
Oh, I can't see the 54. Where does it say 54?
It's behind
On my
your
mobile.
pictures. Yeah,
54.
54.
54.
It's actually 54 million, just to be very precise.
Oh, the current membership of the World Scout movement.
Correct. You're good at this. You get 100 points extra.
I know too many people around you, Craig, and
Yes.
were you Belgium? So
Yes.
Chip and some of these guys.
Yes.
So they all lived the strategy.
Yes. Just to quickly walk you through it, maybe you will see the number. I will not give you the answers now. If I haven't touched upon all of the numbers by the end of the presentation, just give me a nudge and then we'll see if we haven't covered it or where it pops up, right? So I first wanted to start with where we are as a global movement, and then I'll take a look at the structures behind it to make that work. So the movement first, and then the organization second, and then what we actually do. So the mission and purpose, I hope that's all well known to you. We are an educational movement, and the education is aimed at empowering young people to become active citizens so they can impact their local communities and society at large, and in that way, create a better world. That's our mission, adopted since the 90s, our World Scout Conference in South Africa. Nothing has changed there, but we did adopt a new long-term strategy for scouting back in 2014 during the World Scout Conference in Slovenia, where we set our long-term aim for what we wanted to achieve. And that reads, as you can read on the screen, that will be the world's leading educational youth movement, enabling 100 million young people to become active citizens, creating a positive change in their communities and in the world based on our common shared values. This vision is what has been our compass, what has been guiding us for the last couple of years. And there's 6 strategic priorities within that. As you will notice, I'm focusing very much on the strategic parts of WOSM for now. 6 strategic priorities touching upon what our members indicated to be the most critical elements in order to be able to achieve that vision. So there's one is youth engagement. How do we better and more involve young people, both in scouting, in decision-making at all levels, but also how do we make sure that they get more engaged in decision-making and being part of society in their local communities. A big focus on educational methods. This may sound obvious, and it should be, but there's still quite a number of NSOs whose educational program is not really up to par. So there's really a boost of in ensuring that gets improved. But also for those, there's quite a number of NSOs that have a very good youth program or have had a very good youth program for the last 50 years, but it also hasn't changed for the last 50 years. So how do we bring that into the 21st century? And then a big chunk of work for quite a large number of our NSOs. It's something that we're not particularly very good at when it comes to diversity and inclusion. So how can we strengthen and open up scouting proactively to more young people from different backgrounds? And then a big focus on social impact. How can we improve that? And that looks both at the personal impact in terms of the development of skills, competences, and values, but also how can we impact the local community around us and society, or a global society as such. And then 5th is looking at our internal, external communications and external relations. How do we improve on that? And we'll come back to that in a second, or towards the end of the presentation, actually, where we'll have some examples. And then sixth, governance. This looks a lot at our own governance at global level, but also at the governance of our NSOs. The sixth one is a bit of an underlying one, taking a look at how can we create, as I like to call it, an enabling environment for all the rest to take place, to ensure that we have sufficient funding in place and sufficient support for local groups to do what they do best. Well, so 6 strategic priorities that we have been taking with us over the last 8 years now, 7 years, and that we'll continue taking forward in the years to come until we manage to achieve Vision 2023. 6 strategic priorities. But there's one thing more that we've done, and that's we divvied up a bit the vision statement that we have, and we set some KPIs, but some long-term KPIs. So we translated what is in the Vision 2023. So we're saying we want to become the world's leading educational youth movement. That's a lot about recognition and I'm being recognized as a leading educational youth movement. That's about our influence that we have in global decision-making or national decision-making. How can we better foster or strengthen our impact on national youth policies or national educational policies to get, for example, better recognition of the skills and competences developed through Scouting or non-formal education as such. But also how can we better develop recognition for the work our volunteers do or get more funding and so forth, right? And then there's the part enabling 100 million young people. That's usually the part that, or the only part that people remember of our vision statement. That's a big focus on growth. So when we started back in 2014, we were looking at a membership or a global membership of 38 million. We're now at 54, 56, depending a bit on what you count. So we've come a long way, but we also still have quite a bit of work to do still. But yeah, that's been a key focus in the last 3 years, and it likely will be a key focus moving forward. And then the element about active citizens creating a positive change in their communities. So that's about the impact that we have. You can develop skills and competences as you wish. If they're not being used for positive change in a community, they're not really contributing to our mission and vision. And then based on shared values, this is about the unity of the movement. It's about making sure that despite all the differences across the different NSOs and the different cultures and understandings, that we still come together as one global movement moving forward. So that's what our Vision 2023, our long-term vision looks like. And the way that we implement that is, I don't know, maybe you know this already, is that we have triennial plans. So we work in cycles of 3 years. That was one of the threes that was on the previous slide with the numbers. And so we have set, or at least that was the plan. I'll come back to the impact of COVID in a bit, to have a consequential or consecutive 3 years, 3 times 3 years, where each of the world conferences approves a new plan, still building on that long-term vision or contributing to that long-term vision of Vision 2023. So the one builds on top of the other, and the goal was that actually this year, if we would have had our World Conference, we would have initiated the last triennial plan to make sure that we actually reach our vision. Well, so that's how the World Conferences fit into our vision development or implementation. A little bit on the last plan. So for the last 3 years, we've been working on a beautiful plan called Growing Together, where the focus is obviously on growth and the together part. So our goal was to work towards 75 million members by 2020, but also with a key focus on better supporting our NSOs. We have developed a WOSM service model with consultants available, volunteer and staff consultants available to support NSOs directly instead of just providing a toolkit. People or NSOs can tap into the expertise of our trained volunteers to come and help them deliver trainings or support or coaching on specific topics. And then there was a key part on the unity of the movement. which is something that we try to also capture through the World Scout Jamboree and a number of other initiatives where we try to bring people together. We focused more on achieving impact, but also measuring impact. It's a bit missing there. We've rolled out a new methodology of how to better measure our social impact, but also we've brought stronger focus on actually inspiring more NSOs to bring back more focus in their program on the social impact that they can have and should have. And then the fifth one is about being recognized as the world's leading educational youth movement. So there was a big focus the last 3 years on significantly amping up our visibility in the institutional settings, whether that's the UN or the European Union or European Commission, whatever, so that we get better recognition and better visibility and better spotlighting for what we do. And so on that note, we've developed quite a number of partnerships, or we renewed a number of partnerships that will also feed into the way that we deliver our program and our offerings to the NSOs. The Global Growth Agenda is, sorry, phone call, is one of our things that we developed early in the triennium. This was back in early 2018, where we set a bit our long-term ambitions or long-term strategy for how do we want to achieve this 100 million target. And so that looks at how to do better measurement of our members, but also, sorry about that, there we go. So better measurement, but also ensuring that our NSOs also have a focus about how can they work more externally, work with young people that are not per se members, how can they work on their retention of their membership, and how do we reach those countries where there's no NSO yet and foster the development of new scouting organizations there. So that's a bit, it's like a menu of 6-7 items where we have been putting in our efforts. We also hired a new growth manager at world level to help us significantly boost our work there.
Yo, how many countries don't have an NSO yet?
That's a tricky question. Countries recognized by the UN or countries in general, or there's 171 countries where there are NSOs. There's a number of countries that are in the pipeline. So where there's a scout association present, or there is scouting present. And when I say scouting present, that can mean a lot of different things. Sometimes it's just 3 units. Sometimes it's actually a scouting organization. It's just not recognized yet, or it hasn't put in all the paperwork. So that, I mean, it's quite a spectrum of when we say no scouting or recognized scouting organization yet, that can mean quite a number of different things. I'm not sure.
And it changes. I think it changes all the time. Some movements drop in and out of WASM, and other countries have an associate status. So that there's, as you say, there's no straight answer. And how many countries are in the world? Well, that depends who defines it. So there's about 35 or 36 countries that don't have a WASM association. As about a year ago, it might have changed now.
Well, as you said, it depends also a bit on which institution that you follow in terms of what other recognized countries. So yeah, there's still a number out there. There's a number of them where we have developed some strategies on how to, on a more long-term path, want to engage with them. And there's a number of countries, especially in the Africa region and Eurasia, where we have ongoing work from the region to get them on board in the next 3-5. Before we digress too much, and I'm looking at Joshua giving me the eye that I need to move on, so I'll do that. Steve, if you're keen to continue this discussion at some other stage, I'm very happy to do so later on. Right. That was the movement. That was our vision and what we want to achieve. Just a bit about our structures, and I wanted to. And that doesn't work anymore. There we go. Just take it from the start and as close to home as possible for you to start with, geographically home at this stage. So scouting in Europe, also because my understanding that the TAC headquarters is in Brussels somewhere. I have never seen it. I would also take a moment at the end of this meeting to invite myself to next time that I can to join you somewhere. Scouting Europe is serving 1.8 million members for the last few years, so that number has really been increasing. There's about 40 national scout organizations, but as mentioned before, there's quite a number of different associations within those organizations. So there's well over 70 national scout associations in Europe alone. So as for every region, I'm just starting in this one and I'll take a step upwards later on. So there's a European Scout Committee or a regional Scout Committee. In the case of Europe, that exists of 6 committee members or board members. They get elected by the European Regional Scout Conference, their General Assembly basically, and they are supported by the World Scout Bureau. And in this case, there's 2 offices, one in Geneva, which is the head office, and then there's a satellite office in Brussels, which deals also with the external relations with the European entities or institutions. So that is one example. At a world level, so taking that up one scale, we have, as we said before, 54 million members, divided over 171 NSOs or National Scout Organizations across 6 regions. And those are governed, or the World Organization is governed by the World Scout Committee. So that includes 12 elected members from the World Scout Conference, our General Assembly again, which happens every 3 years, plus 6 additional youth advisors who get elected by the World Scout Youth Forum to represent and bring in the voice of young people to the discussions. Plus, sitting around the table is or are the 6 chairs of the 6 different regions, plus our treasurer and Ahmad, our secretary general. So that brings up a total of 27 members. The 27th, sorry, is the interlocutor or the liaison with the World Scout Foundation. That's the World Scout Committee. There's a World Scout Conference, so our triennial General Assembly that meets somewhere in the world where it gets elected to be hosted. But we're supported by the World Scout Bureau, and so there's one global staff with 6 regional offices. The +1 is the Brussels one, the satellite office, and those are stretched across the globe. So there's about 140, I think it's now 130 staff members spread out across those different bureaus. And so those are the 6 regions from east to west. I'll do it like that. We have Asia Pacific, we have in pinkish color, we have Eurasia in purple. The Arab region is in green, with the Africa region in orange, yellow, whatever that is. Europe is blue, and then we have Inter-America, which is yellow. The dots on the throughout the map or across the map are where the regional offices are. I think we covered that. So WASM was established in 1920. 1920 is not just the day that WASM was established. Well, it's about the headquarters, and it was what the date was about. The 100th, we are celebrating this week the centenary of the World Scout Bureau, actually. Voila. We covered this. So the World Scout Conference is our General Assembly. It's where all of the NSOs that are in good standing with WASM, meaning that you've paid your membership fees and you've done all your dues, can come and vote and be part of the decision-making of our movement, where everybody has a voice to share and shape the direction of our platform. The World Scout Committee, it's our chief executive body or chief governance body. We covered that as well, I think. So our goal is largely to oversee the implementation of that triennial plan and ensuring that we have responses to the resolutions or the asks from the World Scout Conference. So we meet twice per year, face-to-face normally. It's a bit different now. And then we have a number of different calls in between. And so we act on behalf of the World Scout Conference in between their meetings. The World Scout Bureau, we covered that. So the headquarters are now based in Kuala Lumpur. The legal seat is still in Geneva, but our main staff is all based in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia at this stage. this is my beautiful attempt at putting together the structure of how everything fits together. You're welcome to provide feedback afterwards. So the NSOs come together or send delegates to the World Scout Conference, which elects the World Scout Committee and decides on a triennial plan. Next to the World Scout Conference, or prior to the World Scout Conference, is this World Scout Youth Forum, which I already mentioned. And this is where youth delegates from the NSOs come together. So if you're under 25, you can get to go to the World Scout Youth Forum if you get delegated by your NSO. And they elect those 6 additional youth advisors who advise the World Scout Committee. They advise, they're part of the conversation. It's not that they send their advice after we decide on anything. So they're part of the discussions, they're part of the conversations. The only difference is that only the 12 elected committee members have a vote. And I can assure you that the youth advisors have very loud voices enough to balance that out. The World Scout Bureau is there to support the work of the World Scout Committee and helps together with the work streams, and the work streams consist of the volunteers from the NSOs, and there's about 140 volunteers as well. So they, together with the World Scout Bureau, ensure the implementation or deliver on the implementation of the triennial plan. And our job is to make sure to oversee that implementation and to govern the movement as a whole during or in between those general assemblies. This is just, it's the operational framework. So the way that we divide our working groups and our task forces and everything, so that's all put into an operational framework, as I said, focusing on 3 what we call work streams. The first one being educational methods, and that focus on everything related to youth program, but also youth engagement, adults in scouting, but also diversity and inclusion, and social impact is fit under there. Communication and strategic partnerships is very much linked to one of our key priorities regarding strengthening our external relations and our positioning, but also it focuses on our internal communication with the NSOs and with the regions. And then good governance is the one that deals with the GSAT, you might have heard of that, but also how do we better strengthen the governance of our NSOs? How do we support them in their fundraising and so forth and so forth and so forth. And then in that little group in the middle, we connect the dots between those 3 work streams and we make sure that they're all working on growth, or that there's a growth I mentioned throughout their work. And we set the strategy during the 3 years, but also start developing the next triennial plan with that beautiful growth and strategy coordination group. And then there's a number of standing committees. You might have heard of these. These are the steering committee, where there is an American included, by the way, Andy Chapman. There's a finance committee, there's an audit committee, the constitution committee, and the honors and awards committee. You might have heard of the Bronze Wolf, which is the highest award that you can get in scouting at the world level. And that gets awarded by the honors and awards committee based on our recommendations. And then we set a number of task forces, and those are varying between from triennium to triennium, because they're based on, or they're created as a response to a ask emanating from the conference through a resolution. So that was a bit what happened in the last 3 years. And then we were in the process of creating a new triennial plan that was supposed to be 2020-2023 to take us to the last stretch of the Vision 2023. And then you might have heard of this, the COVID-19 crisis hit. And so we needed to make a new plan. And the new plan was based on our understanding or reading of the impact of the COVID-19 situation on our NSOs. And where we decided on 5 key priorities moving forward, with the first one being very strongly looking at how can we best support our membership in retaining their membership, because there was a lot of NSOs indicating they were, how do I say this correctly, very concerned with the retention numbers of their membership and the impact that the COVID-19 situation might have on a significant loss of membership. That was 1. 2, the second big priority. So those 2 are really the key main priorities for this year. How do we strengthen NSOs in their new financial reality? So that looks at how can we better strengthen our NSO's capacity to do fundraising or tap into different financial streams. And then there's a look at what we already saw happening a lot through or in local units in their local communities about the impact that they can have and contributing to the local communities as such. The fourth one is looking at how can we make the best of this moment to also connect the whole movement together, not just looking at regions, but also how can we create relationships across regions, kind of what you guys are already doing. And then the fifth one is looking at it's basically our base cluster. It's looking at how can we ensure the continuation of WASM and our long-term focuses and core business continuation. So that's, I mentioned before, our WASM services platform where NSOs can get consultants. So that's part of how do we retrain them to do what they need to do in a Zoom setting and so forth, or in a virtual environment. So that's it. Any questions on that? I recognize that was a lot of a brain dump. See if I can put you back on full screen. Any questions? Have I killed you with too much information already or no? No? Let's see Jeff nodding. Then I'll take you through the last part, and that's a bit about how you can join in, because that was all very abstract and very structural, making that a bit more tangible. So there's ways to be part of WASM or really actively join in. Obviously, there are the world events or the World Scout events with the World Scout Jamboree taking place in Korea in 2023. Sorry, there's the World Scout Moods, which was supposed to take place next year in 2021, which has now been postponed to 2022. And then we have our annual Jota Joti, our Jamboree on the Air and Jamboree on the Internet, which has seen growing success over the last couple of years. There's also been a real rebranding and rising it from the ashes to make it a lot more attractive with a shift of focus from on the air to on the internet and making a big leap into the 21st century. And then I would be amiss to not make mention of the Kennersdijk International Scout Center Centenary coming up also in 2023. I know that you guys already do quite a bit with Kennersdijk, but keep an eye out on what's coming. I think Joshua, who's on the board of Kennersdijk together with me, will also keep you abreast of the plans for that centenary celebration. They have really nice plans for a really magical place. So I very much invite you to join us there in 2023. And then there was a number of additional global initiatives. One thing that we launched back in 2019 was Scouts for SDGs, our contribution to the Sustainable Development Goals. So there's the 17 SDGs that were approved by the UN, not by the UN, by all the members of the UN. It's the follow-up to the Millennium Development Goals, and that will, as a world, work towards by 2030. And so we've said we want to pitch in and put our shoulders under achieving those SDGs. And so we've developed what's called the SDGs Hub. It's a specific website where you can find tons of activities for any age section that you can do around each one of those 17 SDGs. So you can find it when you go to sdgs.scout.org. So there's plenty of materials there. I very much, if you haven't had a chance to take a look at it, I very much invite you to do so. And there's also plenty of good practices from other NSOs about how they've been using or implementing the SDGs within their existing youth program, or created new program elements to respond to that and contribute to this. Yeah, so our ambition is to have 54 million young people do at least together 2 million local actions related to the 17 goals, and then also have a significant contribution in terms of service hours to achieving those SDGs. And that's something that we're looking towards, or that we are currently implementing, but that we will look towards continuing until 2030, until the framework of the SDGs comes to its end. That's one, that's a major one. There's a number of other campaigns or programs and events. So there's one about Dialogue for Peace, which is a lot about how do we develop the competences and skills of young people to be part of peace building in their local communities and peace building in the broadest sense of the word. There's a World Scout environmental program together with WWF, where we look at significantly boosting our efforts towards a more sustainable world. There's the work with the Messenger of Peace, which provides funding for local groups or NSOs to do projects regarding peace development. There's a Patrimonio badge, which is a thing next to the Dialogue for Peace, which is with the UNESCO to help support or develop better understanding of our heritage sites. There's the He for She campaign, which is the thing in the bottom left corner, which is together with UN Women. So that's a partnership with UN Women on ensuring recognition of the role of young women in the world, but also in scouting. And then there's tons of others. I will share you my presentation and you will find more information there. So they're all part of this, sorry, the Better World Framework, which is our umbrella for all of our main global initiatives. And I think there's one more, and this, you're the first one to get to see the slide, because this was launched today. You might have seen this online. And this is something in partnership with the World Health Organization and the UN Youth Fund. So basically, together with the other major youth organizations, global youth organizations in the world, YMCA, YWCA, YX, and so forth, we've come together, and this is a bit spearheaded by WASM, to tap into a fund that is available from the World Health Organization. So this is a partnership where there's quite significant funding available for national scout organizations to run out or deliver on projects in a post-COVID-19 context. So everything is related to how do we reboost or revamp young or youth engagement after the COVID-19 crisis is behind us, and looking at the post-COVID-19 situation. And so there's funding available, there's programming available, and in the coming months, we'll roll out a whole mobilization campaign to make sure that young people are part of rebuilding our society after the COVID-19 is past us. This is a bit in response to, in some countries at least, there's been quite some negative news items regarding the role of young people in this COVID-19 situation. So we also wanted to make sure that young people were made part of the solution and not just looked at as a problem. So that has been launched today, a couple of hours ago, together with the World Health Organization. So that's something really, really hot from the press, and I'm sure that you will find more information about it soon. Voila, that were a number of our key initiatives next to our global events. That it's something where I would really encourage you to take a look at and see how you can bring that also to scouts in your the Mediterranean region and the Horizon and whatever the names of your other districts are. Sorry, I haven't done all of my research on you yet. So that's a bit in a nutshell, WASM or World Scouting, WASM, and then the why, the how, and the what we do. I'm also happy to take any questions. I might even answer to some of them.
Hey, Joe, can you tell us of all the structures and programs and all the stuff you outlined? We really appreciate the overview, but which ones are you most directly involved in, and what motivates you to continue to provide such great leadership at an international level?
So the part that I'm most involved in is, I'll go back to the slide if I can. There we go. It's going to take a bit. So less with the educational youth program. Well, I do a bit on leadership development, but my role or my job is the part here in the middle. I don't know if you can see my mouse here, where I am really focused on ensuring that we implement our triennial plan, our strategic plan, make sure that we keep on track, give a notch here and there where we're not, but also make sure that we do the alignment. And this is maybe a part I left out. So there's a lot of, this is what we do at a global level. All the regions develop their own strategic plans. And then there's a big chunk of work that needs to happen prior to that to make sure that they're aligned in all working towards the same long-term vision of Vision 2023. So there's a big chunk of work on that alignment. There's a big chunk of my work goes to our strategic development. So as I mentioned, I think before, right before COVID hit us, I was busy developing the next strategic plan. So we had a whole process lined out for that until February this year, where we had our workshop with people from all the regions coming together to develop that plan. And that was basically like 2 weeks before the COVID hit us. So that has been put on a pause, unfortunately. And then we moved or shifted gear to make this new plan, or Growing Stronger Together, or 1-year plan. So there's a lot of my key focus is on strategic development. My other key focus is on this overarching key priority of growth. So that's where I'm leading on. So those are the two key elements that make up, I think, 80% of my portfolio. And it's, to be honest, I'm in a very privileged position, because as the chair of that, I can have an overview of everything that's going on in the different areas of work. So yeah, I am very privileged to have that role. It's also something that I very much enjoy doing. And then there's there's two more little bits. One is about continuous improvement. How do you make sure that the volunteers and staff within our operational framework are as empowered as they can be, which has been a bit of a challenge also in COVID-19 times, because everybody's a bit overworked, also with all the different time zones and so forth. And last but not least, as I said before, I am sitting on behalf of WASM on the board of Kenderstijk International Scout Center, together with Joshua. So those are the two smaller bits of my portfolio, and the two bigger bits are growth and strategy. Greg, by the way, Tom, that was a great question. You get 500 points.
Okay.
This is going to be a lesser value one. I just see the WASM languages. And I'm just curious, how many working languages are there in the Global Bureau and things?
How many do you think there are?
I'm just wondering if it's English and French and maybe Spanish.
So there's a number of official languages and there's a number of working languages. Okay. So the working language, it's the opposite of what people usually think it is. So the working languages are English and French. It's what we do most of the work in. Well, to be frank, 80% of the work is in English, and the other 20% is in French. However, all of our official institutional documents need to be provided in all of our not the working languages, the official languages, meaning English, French, Arab, Spanish, and Russian. So there's 5 of those. But that's really not everything gets translated to that. We're making an effort, we're changing a bit. Part of one of our priorities now during this plan is to make sure that we translate, or take also this time with a group of translators to translate quite a bit of existing toolkits and materials into the different languages. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
You still get 300 points for your question though.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yo, just curious, does WASM get any support or cooperation through the UN?
You mean like financial or
any support?
So what we do get is we don't get any financial means, unless, for the example that I gave in terms of the campaign of the disruption generation, which is a fund administered by the World Health Organization, but coming from the UN Youth Fund. So there's that, but that's very specific campaigns. We don't get any funding directly from the UN. What we do get is partnerships and collaboration, and through that, quite a bit of visibility as well. And you might remember somewhere in the beginning, I was mentioning that influence and thus recognition was a key part of our Vision 2023. So in the last few years, I haven't included a picture, but our Secretary General, Ahmed Al-Andawi, who used to be the UN Youth Envoy prior to taking the role of the Secretary General. So he has quite a bit of a network within the UN, which also helps to build that recognition or tap into that. So that's something that has significantly increased. It was something that we were horribly bad at in the past. And so for the last few years, we've seen that really, really increase. And so things like getting this fund from the WHO, which is I think upwards to $5 million US dollars. So we wouldn't have been able to tap into that if we hadn't worked on our recognition for the last couple of years. So there's no direct funding. All of our funding comes from the World Scout Foundation or from the NSO membership fees, and then some grants here and there, but not financial support, but that's quite significant visibility support that comes through here.
Okay.
One more question real quick. In my experience here in living in Europe, I see two models for scouting. There's the British American one, which is mostly older adults leading the units, obviously trying to develop the youth, but ultimately the responsibility is the older adults. And then the European movements, which are almost required by law not to have older adults involved, except perhaps at the headquarters or something, where I remember in Belgium, you couldn't be older than 26, for example. So it's older youth leading the younger youth. Worldwide, are we the exceptions of the British and the Americans and maybe the Canadians, or are there several different models?
There's several different models. Wait, before I answer your question, I'm still going to give 400 points to Jeff for his question. Coming back to your question, there's different models. Maybe just one thing to clarify: the not being allowed to be a leader over the age of 26. That's not completely true. You cannot be in an elected position over the age of something, but you're allowed to be a leader, I think, up to the age of 40 or something. So there is a bit of a threshold, but also not applying everywhere. That's also in one of the associations, but not everywhere. It's Belgium. We have different rules for different associations in different areas of the country. To answer your question, it's a bit mixed. Mostly European NSOs are more youth-led, in brackets. And we see that also in the NSO leadership for the last couple of years. On the other hand, we see it also happening now more in Eurasia, where there's been a bit of a new generation has taken over. For a very long time, there was the same people over and over and over again for the last 30 years. So that has now been a significant shift for some very young people being involved, which is amazing to see. Africa, also sometimes by the nature of the country, because it's such a young continent and the people there are often very young. So in some NSOs, it's very young people leading the charge. In some of them, it's very old people leading the charge or leading the organizations. Having said that, that's about the leadership at national level. At local level, it's very much young people taking a leading role. So it's very different from NSO to NSO and from region to region. I recognize I can't properly answer your question there, but that's just my impression.
I think he meant to say seasoned instead of old.
That's obviously, this is the Zoom thing that, and also I'm not a native English speaker, so that's, I'll blame it on that. Seasoned and well experienced. You get 400 points for your question, Craig. I hope Joshua is taking tally somewhere of the points. Good. Any other questions? Any burning issues that you want to raise? No, that's completely fine. Then I'm happy. I hope I didn't overwhelm you with information. I'll make the presentation available. I'll send an updated version to Joshua so he can circulate it amongst all of you. And then I just want to say thank you for giving me the opportunity to share a little bit about WASM with you. And I'll revisit what I said all the way in the beginning. If we at some point get out of this COVID-19 situation, I would actually be keen, as in not living that far from Brussels, to once visit your headquarters, if I may, because I think I'm a bit fascinated by it. I don't know why. It's a bit mystical.
One more question, Joe.
Yes.
Can't resist. I think the WASM has the Baden-Powell fellowships.
Yeah.
Is that correct? Yes. Because I know there's various requirements for us to get an International Scouting Award, and one of them is for the South America, I think, or the Americas, which is $1,000. But to be a Baden-Powell fellowship is 5 times as expensive, which is a shame. For some of us who would like to contribute to European Scouting, I wish you had a lower level.
Well, you will be very happy to hear. There's different levels for different people and for different regions as well. Because what you mentioned as well, in the Inter-America region, I think Joshua will be better able to explain you what the different tranches are there. If you want to support specifically European scouting, there's a European Scout Foundation as well. And there you have an annual fee of 200 euros, 250 euros, or a lifetime fee of 1,000 euros or 2,000 euros. So that's significantly lower than the 5,000 threshold. And then if you want to contribute to supporting scouting in Africa, there's the Africa Scout Foundation, where it goes anywhere from, I think it has even something about $50, but that's maybe for people under 26. I can't see you very clearly, but I'm assuming that you're under 26, not under 26. No, that's what I thought. But then it's, or a number of times, also good. $50, $100, $150, up to whatever, $10,000. But there's significant differences in tranches about what you can contribute.
Where can I find out about the African, for example? Is it on your website, on the WASM website?
I'll put it in the chat of this Zoom call.
Because several years ago, we visited Namibia, and while I was there, I stopped at the headquarters. I was really curious, but it looks like a very shoestring operation. I'm sure every penny would be very welcome there.
Absolutely.
So that'd be interesting in finding out how to donate without, or would it be best just to donate directly to the Namibian Association?
Depends. If you want to do directly for the Namibian Association, you're definitely invited to do so. And just to be clear, now this is being recorded, so I need to what I say. I'll say it anyway. To be frank, $200 or even $500 or euros, it goes a long way in Africa. And when I went to do some capacity development for the scouts in Togo, they are in a building that they got at some point from the Germans, the German Development Agency. But there's no light. I mean, the roof is leaking when it rains. And then I think if I see how much money my local troop makes with whatever activities that they do and what they spend it for, I mean, it's not that they're spending it wrongly, but the difference they could make with 2,000 euros there, it's incredible. And I think we don't do nearly enough to support that.
But I like the idea of the Africa-wide one. I'm just thinking of Namibia because I went there, but the need is great, I'm sure, everywhere.
Absolutely. And like I said, even small donations can make a huge difference. Okay. I'm looking up if it's Africa Scout Foundation, it's .org. There we go.
So there's also FOSI in Europe, and that runs on a national level, supports the European Scout Foundation, and generally is organized by country. And that's one of the main ways that the European Foundation is supported. So membership of that organization is also very valid and relevant.
Yeah, and so that's the one that costs you 200 to the sound of 200 euros a year.
Yeah,
or 200 if you want to go for a lifetime membership. And the money there is largely going through two small projects in Southeastern Europe or Eastern Southeastern Europe. So anything from Poland, Romania, all the way to the Balkan region, on things, sometimes just creating a new scout house, sometimes it's about getting canoes, or sometimes getting materials for scouting activities. So it can be about anything. The added value of going through something like that is that they do a bit of vetting of the project, and you can also see some rewards.
And FOSI members can actually recommend projects, particularly in Eastern Europe, where the funds and foundations can be focused on. So, and they tie into other organizations, like in the UK, the Eric Frank Trust and other organizations that are donators. So they act as a channel for funding in Europe specifically.
Correct.
All right, well, Yo, I definitely want to, on behalf of the committee, thank you. I can tell the committee that, you know, of the 12 elected members of the World Scout Committee, I pretty much know all of them, but I will say that Yo is probably the most active of all of them. I wonder sometimes how he has a full-time job, because as all of us, he is a volunteer. And, you know, there are times where, you know, me being stateside at 8 p.m. my time, you know, I'm texting him or emailing him not expecting a response right away, get a response, which would be about 2 o'clock his time. So I'm always wondering how he does what he does. He and I, as he mentioned, work in Conderstig together on that committee. In the last triennium, he was a part of the strategic planning, monitoring, and evaluation group that put together some wonderful resources. This short 1-year plan, he and I are working together on basically what I would call the 2 most critical parts of this plan, which is membership growth and retention. And so it's always a pleasure to do business with Yo and to be a part of these working groups. So again, on behalf of this committee, thank you for taking time today to be a part of this, and we look forward to future collaboration.
You're most welcome, Joshua, and it's a pleasure to work with you as well. I'm a bit disappointed though, because I thought you were going to say I was out of all the 12, I was the best looking one, but it's okay. I'll be happy with this.
That's a stretch, but yes. And if you want to be a part of our call for the remaining part, feel free. If you need to jump off, that's fine also, but thank you again.
I'm going to get some dinner because I also still have another call coming up with the steering committee. So I thank you very much for your time. It was a pleasure. I wish you best of luck in what are sometimes very difficult times. You're doing an amazing job, and I look forward to hearing from you in the future.